right now, let's go to the head of the Democratic National Committee. He is, of course, Governor Howard Dean. Governor, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
You know, Governor, you've got to be very excited. 8 years later, you've got Republicans in the state of Florida, of all states, who are now interested in making sure that every vote is counted.
True.
I think we can have Charlie Crist and Howard Dean standing together on a stage fighting for that. Do you think it's going to happen? Will Florida and Michigan get a chance to vote again?
Well, I hope they will, but in order to do that, they've got to do a couple of things. The first is they could come before the Democratic National Committee with a plan that does what they said they would do in the first place, which is to run a process inside the rules like the other 48 states, or they could appeal to the Credentials Committee at the convention. Either one could get them seated. But what we can't do is change the rules in the middle of the game. Both the campaigns knew what the rules were, and to change them in the middle of the game disadvantages or advantages particular candidates. And if you do that, the Democratic Party splits, because it's going to be a close convention. What I can't do is have half the party go away thinking that their candidate got cheated. And the best way to do that is to start changing the rules around to fit one candidate's desires or another's, and that we can't do.
Yeah, and of course, the whole purpose of what you were trying to do and other Democratic leaders are trying to do, tell me if I'm correct here, by setting up the states the way you did, you wanted to make sure that there would be more representation for African Americans and other minorities that may not have been represented as effectively in past schedules. Iowa, New Hampshire,
right,
overwhelmingly white. If you change the rules now, that's an insult to African American leaders.
Well,
correct?
and Hispanics and Native Americans and Asian Americans in Nevada. The other thing is we wanted some geographic diversity. We particularly added South Carolina and Nevada to the early states because we believe we can compete in the West and the South. And then to have two big states come in and Bigfoot those smaller states, those laboratories, I think that was wrong. But look, I'm not here to have a big fight with Florida and Michigan. It's in everybody's interest to have Florida and Michigan seated. But they've got to do it within the same rules that these candidates have been running on for the last year and a half, and the rules that they agreed to in the first place.
So Florida and Michigan, just to make sure we're clear here, Florida and Michigan can't be seated in Denver unless they have do-overs, unless they vote again, unless they play by the rules.
That's not entirely true. They could come in right now and run some kind of another process that's within the rules of the party that they agreed to in the first place, or they could appeal to be seated in Denver. And I don't, you know, at that time it's a different group of people who make that decision. That's the elected delegates of the Democratic convention that will make that decision, not the DNC. So one of those two things. Now, whether the DNC members at Denver or the convention members at Denver are going to want to change the rules in midstream, I think is dubious. This is going to be a very close race. And I don't think, again, the argument that changing the rules in the middle of convention somehow disadvantages half the convention, I think that's a very powerful argument. Look, my job is to get the next president of the United States elected. I think John McCain helped us a lot by getting an endorsement and saying he was going to basically give us 4 more years of George Bush. That's not what the American people want. But our job is to deliver a good candidate, which we're going to, and a convention process which will keep the Democrats united behind them. And the way to do that is to make sure everybody plays by the rules. And if they do that, everybody will be seated.
Governor Dean, it's David Schuster, and you keep talking about the rules. I wonder if you can just clarify, though, the candidates, Obama and Clinton, both agreed they would not campaign in Michigan and Florida. Did they both also agree that the results there should not count?
That was they knew that was the rules going in. I don't know why they agreed not to campaign there. We didn't have anything to do with that. But everybody knew what these rules were well before the campaign really got underway in terms of state-specific efforts. So it wasn't a question of them agreeing to the rules. Actually, a lot of people who were with these campaigns voted for the rules, including some of the folks that are fairly prominently mentioned in the news. But everybody knew what these rules were before. Everybody made their decisions based on what the rules were, which is that the Florida and Michigan wouldn't get their delegates seated if they violated the rules, and I've got to stick to the rules in order to make the process fair.
Governor Dean, it's Mika Brzezinski here. I want to ask you where we go from here in terms of the Democratic Party, where you go from here. I want to read you from the Washington Post this morning, Harold Meyerson. How to determine whom, without wrecking the party's prospects in November, will require sound judgment and firm leadership from Clinton, Obama, and also Party Chairman Howard Dean. The party needs to schedule primaries in Florida and Michigan. Second, party leaders must make clear that some attacks and innuendos should be out of bounds, such as Clinton's hemming and hawing on 60 Minutes over whether Obama is really a Christian. That caution should be conveyed privately, but if such ploys continue, then Dean, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and the as yet unheard from Al Gore should condemn them publicly. Can you do this, and should you do this at this point, given the tone of things at this hour?
We can't set primary dates in Florida and Michigan. Only Michigan and Florida can help us do that. But we certainly are engaged and have been engaged for some time in a process of making sure that the disagreements that the candidates have are issues-based and not personal innuendos. I agree with the Washington Post on that one. We, of course, do that privately. We have those discussions privately, and I'm not going to discuss when we've made had those kinds of discussions. We are in contact with the campaigns on a regular basis, and we are also in contact with lots of leading Democrats about keeping the party together, and we're going to continue to do that. But most of that will be in private, not public.
Howard Dean, exciting times for you and for the Democratic Party. Certainly the excitement out there, and you look at the voter turnout, and you look at the money that's contributed to these candidates. Looks like a big election for Democrats this fall.
Let me just make a point about that. If inside Washington on the cable news shows, everybody wrings their hands about this and about that, because that's what you got to do for 24 hours, I guess. But the truth is, the average reaction of a voter out there is, gee, we got such great candidates, I'm having trouble deciding. That's a good place to be.
That is a great place to be, and you don't talk to a Democrat that doesn't feel blessed to have these two candidates out there.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, great to see you. Thanks for coming on, and we hope to talk to you soon.
My pleasure. Thank you.